I'm joined by Michael Anton, lecturer in politics and research fellow at Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C. Good morning, Michael. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I want to give you sort of an open floor to assess everything that we have seen, beginning with the decision of the Iranians to kill an American, wound 4 Americans, then lay siege to our embassy after we hit their proxy camps, and then Donald Trump's decision to take out Soleimani, and the Iranians' decision to, A, fire missiles without effect at the United States base, and B, shoot down a civilian airliner. Where do we sit? What do you think?
Well, it looks like we sit with having delivered a real bloody nose, black eye, choose your metaphor, to Iran. And Iran has, for the time being, shrunk back in keeping with their historical pattern. Iran takes risks and acts belligerently when it believes that it won't pay a price. And when it does pay a price, it tends to reassess and hang back for a while. Now, when I say for a while, I don't think this is over. I don't think Iran's just going to go away and change its ways. But I do expect and hope that it will at least cool it for the time being. And it's kind of the big question for all of us is for how long? We don't know. Everyone's going to have to remain vigilant. But I think the president did the right thing in not retaliating after that missile attack. It was very fortunate for the United States that the damage from that wasn't worse, that there were no casualties. I actually question whether it was fortunate or whether it was intended by Iran. I heard the chairman of the Joint Chiefs say that absolutely those missiles were intended to cause harm. He sees more intelligence than I do, clearly, so I'll take him at his word. But it's interesting to me that, 15 out of 15 missiles didn't do anything. Makes you wonder. So that's a great outcome for us, and I think we should just sit tight and hang back and see where this goes.
Now, Michael Anton, when my friends over at Media Matters, we call them EMO, they tried to make a little dust up yesterday out of the fact that I was very candid during the missiles flight. When they were in flight and they had taken off directed at American bases, I had sent a message to my friends in the administration. This is going to be shock and awe time. Take out their bridges, blind them, sink their Navy, then do it again. Something like that. Media Matters is, of course, distorting that. But I was ready for massive casualties. I thought they could kill hundreds of Americans. If they had done that, what do you think we would have done?
Well, I think the president told them via tweets, and the president gets mocked for his tweets, but I think in this case they were extremely effective, that we'd be hitting a whole bunch of critical sites. In fact, he named the number 52 after the hostage crisis. I think that, there's a lot of Americans alive. It's now so far in the rearview mirror for so many people in 1979 who just don't really remember, didn't live through what a painful moment that was for America. But Donald Trump, who's in his 70s, absolutely remembers it. He was in his prime at the time. It stuck with him. And that's the lens through which he sees the Iranian regime. So, look, there's a lot of options the Americans have. We have, short of ground war. Here's a great example. Iran, despite being extremely oil-rich, basically can't refine enough gasoline to keep its economy running. It has to import refined gasoline. So you embargo that or make it difficult or impossible for them to use a couple of their container ports where things get offloaded, and they have serious problems. Basically, they can't drive for a while.
Oh, I believe they only have 2 or 3 refineries,
yeah.
Michael.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things we could have done had we needed to do it. I think we should all just be grateful that we didn't need to do it.
Now, let me ask you about the controversy. There are 2 of them. Number one, Mike Lee and a few other Republicans, a handful, Rand Paul and a handful of critics say, we don't know enough, and a whole bunch of Democrats are saying the president acted recklessly in killing a terrorist. I'm kind of astonished, actually, by this. Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, told Steve Inskeep of NPR yesterday, quote, I've seen the intelligence. It was incredibly strong intelligence. A lot of people that want the intelligence released. I wish we could. But at the same time, we don't want to compromise sources and methods that allow us to protect Americans. Marco Rubio on this show said yesterday, those who doubt the intelligence assessment are calling Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a liar. What do you make of this dust-up?
Well, in part, I think it's just an excuse to criticize the president. And not for everyone. I believe, some of the people who are complaining about this are probably being honest or earnest about it. In part, though, I saw what the vice president said yesterday, and I completely sympathize. When you have an all-Congress briefing, meaning, you're literally talking to 100 senators and 435 members of the House, you have to be very careful about what you say, because the fact of the matter is the track record of the U.S. government, and that emphatically includes Congress, is not great at keeping secret things secret, right? So that's why the most secret things are when any administration briefs Congress are usually told only to the heads and ranking members of the intelligence committees, known as the Gang of Eight. So I'm sure the administration gave a restricted, a non-complete and total briefing to Congress out of concern for sources and methods and for the information and the people who helped get the information. That's point one. Point two, though, I think the administration doesn't necessarily need to justify what they did on the basis of some kind of imminent attack when the entire career of Qasem Soleimani, and in a way of the Iranian regime for over 40 years, has been to kill Americans, to harm our interests. And by the way, and if you want to talk about, so that's the past, including the recent past with an assault on our embassy and a strike on contractors and soldiers. If you want to talk about the future, whether or not the intelligence, I haven't seen it, so what do I know? But whether or not it bears out an imminent attack by Qasem Soleimani, the fact is that was the guy's job description, right? He literally got paid and wore a uniform in order to orchestrate and carry out attacks on America, American interests, American allies. So it's whether or not you were convinced by this briefing that he was going to do something next Tuesday is kind of a sideshow and a quibble compared to the bigger picture about what he did in the past and what his entire purpose was within that regime.
I am talking with Michael Anton. He is a lecturer in politics and research fellow at Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C. at the Kirby Center there. Michael, let me ask you about something the president alluded to last night that I have been gleaning from the various news reports. It seems to me we've created a strategic crisis within Iran because Soleimani was number two, and many people lived in fear of him. And it also seems to me that we may have sources within the mullahocracy and the IRGC that are not unhappy that Soleimani is dead and that Khamenei is on his last legs, and they have a succession crisis that we have accelerated. Your assessment?
Well, look, one thing that you've been hearing from the president's critics is a sort of, they'll just replace him. So we angered Iran and we didn't get anything out of it. Yeah, okay, they'll replace him, all right? But look, not every person is as equally replaceable as others. There are such a thing in this world as most valuable players, right? And he definitely was one. So they can replace him, but they're probably not going to replace him with someone as good, as effective, with someone who has the same level of connections and ties in the regions, which means the Iranians' ability to export chaos and terror has gone down with this strike, and that's good for everybody. Iran is a difficult country to assess from the outside. It's a theocracy. It's a dictatorship. So, it's hard to say what's really going on in there. We do know that the economy has been pinched badly by sanctions. We do know that there's been there's several actual long-standing divisions within the country between the people who believe in the so-called Islamic Republic or the theocracy and people who want a more secularized government, point one. Point two, between people who like the export of revolution or Islamic revolution around the world that costs Iran a lot of money, and between people who don't like it and want to see that money spent at home. You might want to call them the sort of Iran first contingent. And there's also a very urban versus rural divide where, Iran has its own equivalent of red states or flyover country, portions of the country that think that Tehran just neglects them and has contempt for them and doesn't pay any attention to their needs, and they're not very happy. All of those divisions are kind of papered over by the foreign policy of the regime, but they're very real, and I think they're about to get more pronounced in the coming days. And
1 minute, actually 45 seconds, Michael Anton. A lot of Democrats have blamed the United States for Iran shooting down a civilian airliner. What do you make of that?
I have no idea how and why they can blame the United States for Iran shooting down a civilian airliner. If everything I've seen is correct, they shot it down using a Russian surface-to-air missile, meaning a missile intended to shoot down military aircraft. We were not flying military aircraft anywhere near Iran, so there's no way they could have mistaken it for an American aircraft. Somehow, if this is what happened, that's a mistake entirely of Iran's own making. It's tragic, but we didn't have anything to do with it.
No, but it does tell us a lot about the Democrats who are making the charge. Michael Anton from Hillsdale College. Thank you, Michael.